introduction. I'm Bethany Silva. I'm the Life Science Industry Manager at Endress+Hauser for the US. For those that aren't familiar with Endress+Hauser, we have locations throughout the US, our main campus being in Greenwood, Indiana. That's our US headquarters. We do have a global headquarters in Switzerland, but most of our manufacturing is actually done just outside Indiana. And I'll introduce Jason.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jason Pennington. I lead our digitalization connectivity efforts for the U.S. market and for Endress+Hauser.
Great. So I'll start us off. Today we're going to be discussing, I'll start us off with leveraging concepts of the technologies that are ripe for pragmatic adoption and optimization. Jason then will move into the foundations to consider for moving beyond just the sensors. And discuss the concept of technical debt. As we see so much data, do we actually need all that data, and how do we utilize all that data? Highlighting the importance of people and process. We heard a lot about that yesterday, how this does need to be a journey with the whole team and this early adoption with the stakeholders, and driving change with digitalization journey. So I'll start us off with what we already kind of know, which is the difference between preventative and predictive maintenance. But some of the analogies I like to use is actually we're trying to avoid this, the breakdown, right? So if we think about our equipment and our instrumentation, this is the last resort. This is what we don't want to have happen. So we implement all these time-based or intervals to try and prevent that. So if you look at your tires, for example, you set tire rotations based off, hey, every 5,000 miles do a tire rotation. But then sometimes people say, well, it depends. It depends on the conditions, how hard you drive, how, the weather conditions on the road, whether you hit potholes like we have here in Boston. So then all of a sudden it becomes variability of, okay, so what is this time base? And then some people say, is it myth? Is it, maybe we just do it every year, right? So a lot of our calibration and maintenance schedules are based off just kind of going, it feels good. We'll do 12 months. So that's the current state of what we usually do. It's been true and tried for now quite some time, and I understand why it was developed. But we really want to start moving into the dashboard, right? We want to start looking at our equipment and having our equipment feed us information so that it tells us when is the optimal time to do maintenance. Both are in essence trying to prevent that breakdown, but we think this is obviously more efficient. So to set that stage, I'm going to start with a technology that's pretty common out in most processes. For flow technologies, it's Coriolis. And we did a study with Coriolis flow meters over 10 years. We did 3,000 Coriolis meters in all different types of industries: oil and gas, chemical, water, wastewater, life science, food and beverage. A lot of them are very rigorous, right? They're very difficult, heavy industries. And after 10 years, 95% of them were still within 0.2% uncertainty, or with drift. So the fact is, Coriolis is very stable, but yet we calibrate it every 6 months, 12 months, and we actually introduce, and we can prove this, we introduce more risk touching it, removing it, putting it up on our rig, doing the calibration, reinstalling it. We know that this actually brings in more risk than just leaving it. The 0.2% after 10 years is proven. So we do have this study that we provide for data set. But when we look at the calibration, what is the calibration actually doing? Well, it's actually comparing what is being measured in that Coriolis to a known NIST traceable reference, right? But the sensor itself becomes a black box. We just care about what the measurement is showing, right? We actually don't know what's going on with that meter itself. So the calibration is important, but it's kind of blind. So that's the calibration in essence. But in between, if we have the calibration set up, okay, I did it, and then I have an interval of 12 months later, I'm completely blind in between those 12 months. I don't know what's going on. I hope it's right? And if it does go out of tolerance, you don't know if that out of tolerance happened on day 2 or day 364. You're completely blind. And if it does become out of tolerance, okay, when did it actually become out of tolerance? That investigation is a lot harder to do, right? Because you have 12 months of no data. So we've introduced some technologies. Ours at Endress+Hauser is called Heartbeat technology. It's a verification. It's actually doing inline diagnostics of the meter, the entire meter. So it's doing a lot more than just a black box comparison of measurement values. So this is going to happen actually inline during the process. No process interruption. It's happening behind the scenes. It's still measuring. Nothing's changing on your measurement point. But it's doing this continuously. So now we have some additional data in between those calibration intervals, right? So this is the full diagnostics coverage of that verification. It's checking everything from the entire loop. So everything from the I/O module, the power supply on the transmitter, and it's checking the pickup coils, it's checking the excitation system of the Coriolis. So it's checking the entire meter, right? So this, for us, is a lot more valuable to have this kind of data set available to us in the interim, right? So that's just Coriolis. There's also several other technologies that we offer this verification for. So level, pressure, temperature, our liquid analysis line. Coriolis just tends to be the one everybody kind of goes to because they really don't want to calibrate them. And we know it's not always a true functioning measurement, so we're not controlling a whole lot off Coriolis. So it's an easy one to kind of pick off first. But we do have this technology throughout our entire instrumentation portfolio. So as I mentioned, the heartbeat technology is actually going on. It's almost just taking these pulses constantly. When you get an alarm, it's actually going to alert you, and you might adjust your calibration to earlier, right? So we're actually doing it when it's needed, not just because the time stamp says, hey, now 12 months is up, now you have to do the calibration. But what we really want to get into is being able to have that diagnostics and utilize all that data to actually start doing predictive, right? So prescriptive. We actually can tell when the sensor is going to need to be calibrated. We know when it's going to likely fail. So this is all within its data collection of that heartbeat technology. So there's lots of diagnostics and data that's coming out of that would need to be analyzed. But this is the way that we really want to be moving towards, so that we're actually optimizing the calibration cycles. So a lot of people ask me about recommendations from the supplier as the manufacturer of the sensors. We do have some recommendations for calibration strategy for life sciences. The biggest challenge we have is that this is all based on your processes and your risk assessment that needs to be done. So we would love to give you your recommendations, but unfortunately it depends type of thing, right? Because we don't know what your processes are. We don't understand your complete setup. We don't understand, are you using solvents? Are you using Wi-Fi? I mean, that's a very different type of measurement in criticality. So those things need to be really done by a risk assessment. But we do have some recommendations. So we do have this letter that's recommended intervals for using heartbeat with calibration for Coriolis. So we do have this as a published letter. If you wanted it, you can reach out to us. We can be able to provide this. But again, of course, it has that caveat of you still have to do your own risk assessment. We also have a published white paper. So if you scan that, you can actually be taken right to the heartbeat technology and how to work with the regulators and work in a GMP space using this calibration, heartbeat verification, kind of interval optimization. So with that, I would like to pass it over to my colleague, Jason Pennington. Oh, right.
Thanks, Bethany.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so my role at Endress+Hauser is a lot about digitalization, connectivity, and generally speaking, I work a lot with our industry teams like Bethany. So from a life science industry acumen and so forth, she's really that kind of expert and driver for me. My role is helping our customers understand, where is this data that you talk about? How do I get it? The marketing people showed me this great technology. Now what can I do with it, and what does it mean, right? So I often talk about these kind of pillars for connectivity as it relates to our products and our customers. So data, we've heard that very generally over the last day or so, but for us, I'll show an example of what I kind of consider a data audit or a data map analysis of what products we have. So the quality of data and cleaning. So first and foremost, if you don't believe the data, it's very difficult for you to suggest you're going to take action with it. So that integrity as well. So what does data integrity mean? And I usually kind of put these in context of application. We'll get to that. And then, of course, governance. So governance for us looks a lot like the dialogue of how are you getting data from our field sensors to your host systems, control systems, and so forth. Is it Ethernet IP? Is it Profinet? Is it just 4 to 20, right? So we get in there. And then infrastructure. So a lot of my team's day is spent trying to figure out how to plug a serial cable into an iPhone. You have these most wonderful advanced control systems, computing systems, corporate clouds, and we're sitting on a mountain of legacy ISA 90, 95, 99 data stacks with analog wires. It's very difficult in some cases, is where we talk about this idea of technical debt, right? So how do we take advantage of these nice new technologies from the Emersons, the E&H, and the Mettler Toledos and so forth? There is a lot of data there trapped in your devices you may not even know exists. Analytics. So this is, for me, I think one thing as we build this digital solutions team in the U.S., we don't necessarily want to present ourselves as the people walking around with solutions looking for your problems. So coming up now on my 30th year at Endress+Hauser, I assure you it's a lot more fruitful for us to understand your problems and dialogue with you and then come back to say, here's some potential solutions we have that maybe address some of the opportunities you see. And then always culture. So how do we not only deliver a solution, but how do we encompass the employee that's going to be tasked with implementing that solution? So training, culture, how do we help you make these changes? One of the most, there we go. So one of the most basic things we do with our customers is just an inventory or a map of your data. What exists in your sensors, your valve positioners, and so forth? What kind of data is there? What kind of diagnostics are there? Are some of those instruments or analyzers actually multivariable in nature, and perhaps we're only using a 4 to 20 milliamp signal to get the PV? What else could we be doing? And then that data type. So when I say smart or focused, as Bethany said, within our heartbeat, or at Emerson, they have a technology that's similar called smart meter verification. We're actually looking at some of these parameters in real time of the sensor and giving live values that are indication. For us, in many cases, we understand people want a natural language or English language or German, for example, description of what does this value actually mean. So I don't necessarily have to be a Swiss R&D scientist to understand what this meter is telling me. I want some understanding of what should I be doing. So then always this, when I say customized effort. So how difficult is it to get this data? And based on my role in the company, what tools do I have at my disposal to actually go get this data? And from there, what can I do with it? We like to work with our customers a lot to understand, when we say analyze, what are the critical and non-critical devices or instrumentations? What maybe some capabilities that we have for non-critical devices that perhaps wouldn't go into critical devices. So for example, today I can show within our partnership as a tech partner for Rockwell Automation, using their CMMS system to set a schedule that automatically creates work orders, performs heartbeat verification on your devices, and when they pass, it will close the work order and file the paperwork for you. If they fail, it will open a child ticket and tell you why did it fail, what was the most likely cause, and are there suggested remedies for you to rectify that failure. That is a very real use case today that we have rolled out in about 25 cities. So diagnostics, we subscribe very heavily at E&H to a technology that's called NMOR or NE107. Doesn't necessarily matter the norm for many of our customers, but what it does is essentially build an FMEA style plan within our devices. So a red X is very simply a failure. A blue oil can means the device needs maintenance. Yellow is out of spec, and so forth. So we're basically coding and classifying the diagnostics in our devices and creating a log with some accountability behind those basically actions. The usability here is kind of now building a database for you as you move towards this kind of predictive future that gives you the data and the understanding to basically make those predictions on a very factual history. So if I know, for example, this analyzer needs maintenance every 9 months, why don't I generate a work order on the 7th so that I have time to actually execute it and implement it, so by the time the 10th week comes around, it doesn't go into a failure mode. So very easy understanding use cases that way. We talk a lot about metrics and test coverage. So when Bethany says heartbeat, it's great. It's TÜV, it's ISO 17025, here's your paper. But we often get involved in discussions. What does that really mean at a technology level? So pH sensors behave very differently than flow meters, as do pressure transmitters. So what is the data really telling you about the health of that unique sensor? They all work a little different. And then ultimately here, data integrity. If you don't believe the results we're providing you, you're not very likely to use them and implement them. So how do we help basically create some data quality and align and apply the data we're able to provide you to kind of a why, right? So if without a why, it's just data, and it mounts up. So how does this look in practice? So if I thought about now, even we have some LTE direct powered sensors that triangulate themselves and drop their locations on a map, right? So not for every use case, but generally speaking, if you had a visualization of your plant and you could see devices that were green checks, red X, blue needs maintenance, you can start to kind of prioritize your activities. So for us, this is just simply an umbrella of heartbeat diagnostics. In the middle here is something that Bethany talked about, heartbeat verification. So how do I create a point in time? It's like I get up every morning and step on the scale so that I don't accidentally gain 10 pounds and say, oh no, if I can catch a pound at a time, I can do something with that. That's basically our verification. So for example, in a Rockwell system, if anybody has Siemens or Emerson Delta V, we can certainly talk about those applications or implementation later. But for the sake of time, in a Rockwell system, our Ethernet IP-enabled devices have an add-on profile. So in my Studio 5000, I can implement said profile and I can execute a heartbeat directly from a push button on Factory Talk View. That'll launch a PDF viewer for you so that then you can move the result of that verification anywhere within your network that it needs to go, whether it's Maximo or some other folder structure. The last one's a little bit difficult more sometimes to explain and think about, but heartbeat monitoring. So every one of our sensors has a embedded reference system that's built with these reference devices according to how the technology works. So kind of think a thermal mass flow meter has a very high tolerance RTD. A mag meter has some electrical references based on Faraday's law, right? Coriolis has some incredibly high tolerance crystals inside that are the oscillators or a known frequency. If we're monitoring all the data in real time against these basically reference points, we can start to make some inference on what is that device telling us. Do I have some biofilm forming? Why is this flow tube now heavier than it used to be when I apply the same amount of energy to the excitation system? The output of that and how you basically label those inferences are kind of unique to your application. If I was Freeport McMoran pumping copper slurry, I'm going to probably start to abrade my flow tube. Now the metal's less in the pipe, so it starts to resonate at a much higher frequency with the same amount of energy. So there's other ways we can talk about your applications in the context, but then basically generate some thresholds or triggers, or better yet, some extrapolation of what's really happening to my sensor in real time. This kind of breaks out what I can do with these diagnostics. And we're certainly not the only one. If you take away anything, ask your suppliers, are they IEC 62443 compliant for sensors? So are they secure by design and development? And then do they support Namur diagnostics? So for you, Namur diagnostics is just that simple check engine light or tire pressure or these things that we've become accustomed to over time. You can absolutely bring those in. And as we develop these products, when we're basically writing firmware, we know that this error, this output, is probably caused by these 2 or 3 things. These are the 2 or 3 recommendations you can do to resolve that issue. But nonetheless, over HART or Ethernet or Profinet, these kind of very clear messages are being transmitted to you, to your host. So whether that's an Emerson Delta V with AMS on the back, or if it's Siemens S7, we can get this data to you in a very easy to understand kind of way. So practical use case. So this was interesting. Again, it kind of came through the dialogue. So we want to know, we have a task to basically monitor and manage device configuration in our facility. So through these diagnostics in our device, again with this kind of IEC 62443 secure by design, we generate passcode levels for our devices. So there's a plant admin, there's a maintenance and engineering role. So you kind of know, not by the person, but by the persona who's logging into the device. They have certain ability to make changes to the device based on their role. In this specific case, if I wanted to, within our devices, I can change the diagnostic behavior. So I go look at, for example, configuration change, configuration reset, parameter change. So I assign that diagnostic to an out-of-spec type of report, or perhaps it's a failure mode, depending on the severity. If it's critical versus non-critical, I'm able to now pass that information through my Rockwell PLC, make that flash on Factory Talk Historian to say, a maintenance engineer changed the configuration of this tag on this date and time. Here is what they changed. Do you want to revert back to the previous configuration, or do you want to analyze what is the proper action to take with that device? If I just simply had a 22 milliamp alarm in Factory Talk Historian, and Rockwell hates when I say this, you get a stupid little alarm bell that flashes and you don't know what it means. It just means the device went to 22 milliamps. Nobody knows what that means until you start sending people to the device to analyze. That is time and money versus understanding exactly what changed, why, and who. So now this is kind of what we see the vision of this going as some new networking technologies, and maybe now some unique ideas that are really spawning with this age of digitalization. So am I okay? Hey, I did maintenance on myself. That freed up your people to go do higher value things. I'm hurting right now. Can you come take a look at me? This is why I'm likely hurting, and you should probably try these remedies with me. I could launch an AMS screen on my Delta V and hit the controller and absolutely go to that device and execute that maintenance plan from my control room. I could take a tablet and go to the site itself and do that in real time on my own. And that's where I love to have the dialogue of what does that user journey or the role journey look like in your facility? How do we put the right tool in the right people? And again, now that having a lot of fun at Endress+Hauser building the new products we're building, how do I get the data to your people in 2 clicks or less based on their role? So this may be, again, out of order. This is a lot of my day. Can you talk to my customer about Ethernet IP? They want to use APL. They have a Siemens. They have a Rockwell. How do we get them heartbeat data? What can we do? So we generally support all of these field network technologies within Endress+Hauser and have integration documents of how do I get this data to who and where, and are there libraries or other support mechanisms. We generally don't start talking about cloud or any of these types of technologies, but it's more the dialogue. Where is the data? How do you want to get it, and where does it need to go? More importantly, when it's there, who needs to see it, and what are they going to do with it? So in this case, it's just, again, kind of walking through one person's journey. I want to take my laptop to a device. I want to connect to it. I want to do a maintenance routine and extract that data. I'm going to launch a web server. I wirelessly connect to the device. I do what I do. I generate a PDF. Now, because I'm on my authenticated work laptop, I'm going to move that certificate back to Maximo where it needs to go. I'm going to close my work order. Another way to get it is, say, from my control room, I want to use Field Care, or there's another very similar platform called Pactware. I have the right DTMs and drivers. I'm going to tunnel through the network, address that tag, do the exact same tool. So this, again, leveraging events. Back to I think here very close to the end, Miss Holly. So how do I leverage the data that's there? So every Endress+Hauser device, there's a little piece of memory in the underbelly of all of our devices called histogram. So histogram just simply knows when I was made. It knows every alarm I've ever witnessed, how many heartbeat verifications have I had, and then ultimately you're able to access that data. So what can I do with it? So in the back, we're kind of watching, again, for data integrity. Can you trust the data you're getting? Is my connectivity good? Is my health good? Here's my product logbook. Now can I share that data out over, let's say, a Rockwell Thin Manager, a CMMS system, and so on and so forth. How do I make that data accessible and usable? So then, lastly, this is just kind of implementing from Rockwell's CMMS fix. I can do a preventative maintenance and schedule it. So Rockwell's fix will tell the PLC to go address that tag, launch a work order, perform a verification on this schedule, give me the PDF, and close the work order. I can then basically look at a status of all my verifications and activities that have been done in the plant, make some priorities, and now basically create a punch list. If I want to send a focus team on the outliers or the bad actors, I can do that. And then lastly, this is kind of monitoring. And this is where we really like to work with the customer to understand what are we monitoring, how are we going to test it and validate it, and basically create the right thresholds so that the inferences we're providing you are meaningful and usable. So with that, I think we come to an end. And then if we have any questions, we can either address those now. We'd love to talk to you later.